we have finally arrived. After many predictions, much speculation, and slowly learning the numerical designation of each of the 10 Espada, this chapter has given me the confirmation of the final 3 spots. So I finally know all of the Espada's rankings, and yeah, I was very wrong. Very, very, very wrong about pretty much everything. I know that now, just like you guys all knew the second that you watched me make those guesses. Everyone said I got the personalities pretty right, which I've now seen how well I can read vibes, but they said I got the numbers mostly wrong, and yeah, I definitely did. As much as I hate to admit it, my predictions were incorrect far more than they were right. I only placed one member accurately, and he's not even one that I like very much, but I figured given that I spent a whole video initially making my guesses about the Espada numbers, and a whole other video letting my wife also take a shot at predicting the placements, because I did those videos about the Espada numbers, it would only make sense that I do a whole video devoted to how I feel now that I can see all of the numbers, and my reaction and my response to the full list. I've reacted as I've gone along to the ones as I learn them, but yeah, this is going to be more of a broad opinion of my list as a whole. But first, let's start with how I feel about the latest chapter's big reveals of the top 3, and then after that, I'll look back and talk about my initial predictions and how well I managed to do with them. And by how well, I mean how terrible I did with them, because, yeah. Just as a reminder, going into this chapter, I knew that these 3 were the top ranked, but we weren't told yet about what numbers each of them had. But now, after this chapter, that's all changed. So let's get into it. Let's talk about these reveals. So Haribel is fighting Captain Hitsugaya, and then she reveals, and I mean reveals, that she is the number 3 ranked Espada. I originally had her pinned at number 5. And I wasn't too far off with that. She wasn't giving me like number 1 energy, so I'm not surprised that she wasn't at the very top. I do think it's interesting that she has Nell's old number, so I hope we get to see what that transition was like after Nell was literally thrown out of Las Noches. But I've got to say, besides the number reveal, which was just pretty wild that she just kind of took off her shirt and showed us, her face reveal was awesome. I knew there had to be something up with her mouth because of just how high her collar was, but I didn't picture something quite like this. It's appropriately threatening in the same way that Grimmjow's shattered mask was. It adds kind of an animalistic quality to the character, and it's cool looking. She looks great. Scary even. I'm overall satisfied with this number 3 placement. It checks out, and I'm excited to see more of what she can do now in action. Now, number 2 hurts me a bit because, well, I put all of my chips on Baragan being the number 1 ranked Espada. I was so sure of it. Between the kingly aesthetic and maybe actual royal position, considering his crown, his throne, and how his underlings call him King Baragan, though maybe they're all just fangirling over him, all of that, and the notion I had that he was kind of like Yamamoto's opposite, I really thought that he seemed like the logical number 1 spot. Hell, some of our heroes even thought so too, so at least I wasn't the only one having this line of thought. Kubo was definitely trying to lead the readers into that direction, and I just kind of got swept up into his manipulation, I suppose. Like I talked about a couple videos ago, Baragan took command of the Arankars when Aizen was trapped, which seems like the natural thing for the head Espada to do, but no, he was revealed to only be number 2. So I was very close guessing him as number 1, but I gave him just a tiny bit too much credit. And that makes it hurt even more, just how close I was with this one. It's so tough because I was so certain with him. As I kept getting more and more number reveals, my top spot still kept remaining open, and Baragan's rank was unknown, making me more and more hopeful that I might have gotten the number 1 right. If I had gotten everything else wrong on this list, but I had gotten the number 1 right, that would have been enough for me. That would have been amazing. But no. I really like that the reveal of Barragan as number 2 is not some big moment. And it's not even him showing off his tattoo or anything. It's just by process of elimination once you find out who the real number 1 is. I really love this because Barragan is clearly the kind of guy that likes to act like he's the most powerful and the leader above all other Espada. So of course he wouldn't want to show off his actual rank. Of course he wouldn't make a big deal out of it or even talk about it at all. He just likes to take charge to fool people like me into thinking that he's the big cheese when he isn't. This guess being wrong hurts the most because I had waited so long with the hope that I was right, but it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it except remember a time when I was so blissfully convinced into believing that I was right. Okay, the number 1 reveal was a really, really great moment and a perfect way to reveal to everyone that the top Espada is Stark. Shunsui, like me, and maybe like the other gullible people like me, assumed that Barragan was number 1 only for Stark to pull off his glove and show the tattoo on the back of his hand. It's such a sudden, simple gesture, like he just pulls off his glove, and then he says, "Sorry, I am the Primera Espada." Or, "Sorry, I'm number 1." And it's a line that hits like a freight train. He's saying sorry because Shunsui assumed wrong, just like I did. Stark is practically apologizing to some readers like me, for fooling us, pitying me for guessing incorrectly. I couldn't believe it. Stark is the number 1 Espada. Yes, the tired and disinterested man that I thought was a little too carefree to be ranked too high. However, let the record show that I did leave room in my original speculation for this outcome. I put him at number 4, but I thought that his character seemed like it could easily end up on either side of that because of what we'd seen of his attitude, as little of it as we'd seen. I thought maybe he wouldn't be too high because he's too carefree, but at the same time there was a chance that he was so unbothered because he was high up and so powerful. I chose number 4 for my placement of him, mostly because I couldn't figure out which of those it was, but it turned out to be the latter. And hey, as surprising as it was, it makes sense. And it was set up subtly. I looked back on the moment when Barragan took control of the battlefield, and sure enough, there was a little hint about Stark outranking him that I didn't catch when I first read that panel. But going back and looking at it more closely, Barragan asks if anyone has a problem with him taking command of the Arankar army, and Stark starts to submit to him, saying he had no problem with Barragan taking charge, only for his Fraction to kick him for saying that. Probably because she sees that he's not fulfilling his role as the number 1 Espada, instead choosing the laziest path and allowing someone ranked beneath him to take command instead. She might have wanted Stark to stake his claim, but Stark being Stark wasn't interested, and apparently couldn't be swayed. But it was probably for the best. Given what we've seen from Stark so far, he isn't really a natural leader, and he certainly doesn't have a throne and a crown and a bunch of guys. You know, it even seems like he's just got one underling. And Barragan had like a whole gang of guys. Sure, they weren't that impressive, but like they all followed him. They called him King Barragan, and they all, one of them even mentioned that like they only had one god and it was the king, so I assume they're talking about Barragan. The point is, Barragan seems like a natural leader. Stark certainly doesn't. But I think that's part of the genius of this reveal, and of the genius of using Barragan as a red herring. I am so excited to see what he can do. What all 3 of them can do, now that we know their ranks, but Stark specifically. If he's the number 1, I'm sure he's got to be pretty impressive. Maybe too much for Shunsui to handle, but we've also never really seen Shunsui go all out either. So it's going to be interesting, I think, but really this was an incredible move by Kubo that I applaud him for. From the moment we first saw the Espada at that meeting as a group, Stark was shown to be the least enthusiastic, the least interested, and the most chill. He took a nap while Aranero was getting stabbed in the face. Face? He's just been vibing, and the only real plot relevant thing he's done in the story prior to this was recapture Orihime real quick. The choice of Kubo characterizing Stark like this rides that fine line of it's almost an obvious misdirect, but not obvious enough to immediately give it away. Like, maybe some of you guys guessed this. I certainly didn't, if any of that makes sense, but it was just on that line. When you look back, it's like, of course, like that's the obvious. You wouldn't expect it. But I just didn't expect it. It was smart enough to fool me, is what I'm saying, and Kubo has taught me time and time again that I'm gullible, so here we are once again, Kubo. I salute you for fooling me. Now, looking back, let's see how well I did with my guesses of the list. Let's really kind of recap the Espada ranking. Number 10 being Yami was already confirmed in the story before I made my predictions, so that was really simple and not a guess at all. I still wonder where the heck he went, but yeah, we've known for a while that he's number 10. Number 9 was Eren Yarrow, who I had guessed was number 8, so it was a close one, and he kind of turned out to be what I thought he'd be in terms of like strength. I definitely didn't think he'd be two little skulls floating in a jar, but I did think he didn't seem like a big physical threat, and he turned out to be more interested in mind games. I was pretty close on this one. Yeah, I was one away, not bad. Same deal with number 8, I was also close with him because I had Xyloporo at number 9, so I just flipped them by accident. And it didn't really surprise me for the same reason as Eren Yarrow didn't really surprise me. They didn't look like they'd be much of a fight. There was the slim chance that Xyloporo would be like another Aizen situation where he was meant to be unassuming and disarming to trick the reader, but nope. Still, both him and Eren Yarrow are very memorable to me, and probably the creepiest people on the list, despite being so low. You know who wasn't memorable? The one and only Espada whose number I guessed right. Zamari. Yep. So Zamari will continue to have a very special place in my heart, because he wasn't just the first Espada number I got right, but the only Espada number I got right. I may hate your resurrection, but we're bonded for life, man. You and me, Zamari. All these eyes, but we can't see correctly. Number 6 was Grimjow, but we knew that from his very first appearance, I think. Great character. Is he alive? Where did he end up? Last we saw him, I think, was when Ichigo protected him from Neutra, right? I hope he's okay, because he's arguably one of the coolest people in the whole series, and I'd love to see him again. But yeah, he was number 6, we already knew that. So, just kind of by default. And speaking of Neutra, I gave him what he wanted, alright? I gave him what he wanted, and I didn't even know he wanted it at the time, but I put him at number 3 when he was a couple spots below at number 5. It's funny because based on his design, I thought he'd be high up, and I even considered for a moment that he might be number 1, but because it just seemed like Kubo went out of his way to make Neutra extra distinctive visually. And while he might not have been highly ranked, and instead the very middle of the pack, he still was important, memorable, and very strong. Something of a benchmark to show just how tough the second half of the Espada were going to be. I liked Neutra. He was a good character, a good bad guy. And yeah, I tried, man. I gave you number 3. Like, you went through all that trouble to get rid of Nell, and you still weren't placed at number 3, but I put you there. If only for a second. You were there, man. You made it. I already went into detail in another video about how clever the Ukiura reveal as number 4 was, and how it was an even heavier misdirect than I expected. I thought he'd be number 2 because he was being painted as like the major Espada threat. So I figured Kubo would have had the twist be that someone was stronger, but then it turned out there were 3 people stronger than him. It was clever, and a really humbling moment for Ichigo when he found out. Loved that whole reveal. Kind of iconic. And yeah, 1, 2, and 3 are now known. Harabel makes sense to me in this spot, in this high tier, but I'm truly deeply sad about being just slightly off with Barragan. Ugh, really. Stark is surprising as number 1, but these reveals are really just the beginning. I can't wait to see these 3 Espadas really cut loose in battle. I'm hoping we'll get more personal interactions or history throughout this too, because that's been one of the strengths of this villain group. Getting glimpses of their internal dynamics as they all hungrily try to survive or rise in this hierarchy that Aizen has put them in. So let's look at the scoreboard between my predictions, my wife's predictions, and the actual Espada ranking. And it looks like, as usual, her predictions are better than mine. Only slightly. She didn't, completely blow me out of the water, but she definitely got it more than I did. Anyway. But I did kind of get closer with my guesses that were wrong than some of hers. Just saying. But yeah, those were our guesses going into this. It would have been amazing if one of us just completely nailed it, but it didn't happen. Overall, I think Kubo introducing this concept was just a great way to build in intrigue about the power, the position, and the threat of these antagonists. It allows for the readers to think about how concerned they should be while also creating a system that inspires these characters to make different actions in the story, even fight among themselves. It's also a testament to Aizen and how he operates as a character, which I've talked a little bit about before, but he's bringing order to a wild world of hollows, establishing a clear, tidy designation system to be followed in his new world, as these monsters became Arankars. All of this, the Espada system, the Espada as a group, it's all just great, and it's brought me a lot of wonderful thoughts, predictions, and a roller coaster of fun reveals as I've moved through the story. So thanks for all of these numbers, Kubo. It was a wonderful countdown. And thank you all for putting up with all of my guesses, for not spoiling anything. And yeah, this was a wild ride as we finally made our way to first place. That's it for this weekend, guys. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care. I'll see you soon.